Hi guys, live from our cryptid camper. I'm Tom here with my good friend Shay, and we'd like to thank you for joining us for season 1, episode 17 of the Scare Your Pants Off, our American Road Trip podcast. Well, today we decided to stay in sunny Florida. So, how you doing today, Shay?
Really, really good. I'm actually really excited to be doing an episode a little out of our norm. It was unplanned, but I kind of like throwing something new into the mix and Robert the Doll. So, I mean, what's not to love? It's going to be an awesome story.
I agree, and yeah, I mean, we were talking, guys, last week, and it was like I had done some research about it, and we kind of decided that he deserved his own episode. There's just so much to it. It's just there's so much to talk about here, and it's one of my favorite paranormal haunting stories. It really creeps me out. So yeah, today's episode is just going to be dedicated to solely Robert. Before we even start, I want to thank Robert for letting us do this show.
Yep.
You'll understand more as we go on why I'm doing that. But thank you, Robert, for letting us do a show on you. We're doing it out of respect, not
It's a
and
tribute.
yes, a tribute, admiration to Robert because it's such a great story. Um, so yeah, should we get into it?
I think we should, honestly.
Oh,
I'm super excited and I'm not gonna lie, I actually have goosebumps. So
nice.
yeah, a little bit.
This is one of those ones too. Like when I'm reading some of the things, I get the back of my neck, the hair standing up. So it's no, this is great. This is a lot of fun. I wanted to have a deeper conversation with just me and Shay about this. So you guys are in for a treat, and so are we, because this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to get into it's sort of his origins and some of his history here first. It's dense, but I think it's important. So here we go. All right, Robert the Doll. The doll originally belonged to Robert Eugene Otto. The doll was reportedly manufactured by the Steiff Company of Germany and was purchased by Otto's grandfather while on a business trip to Germany in 1904 and was given to Robert as a birthday gift when he got back.
So that's funny. Not to interrupt, but
No, please.
I think I'm finding that Robert might possibly have more than one possible origin story because I've actually always heard that the the family actually had a maid who had a young daughter that was possibly, obviously hearsay, I don't know, possibly the illegitimate child of Robert Eugene's father. And that young girl actually gifted Robert the doll um, as almost a revenge for a way he may have upset her.
That's interesting because I haven't heard that exact version, but I have heard a sort of a different version of it with the servant. She's of Bahamian descent from the Bahamas, having possibly having. I've heard about the illegitimate, daughter, blah blah blah. I had heard that maybe she had got Robert, put some sort of voodoo hex on it, and gave it because the mother, the servant, had given it because of something that went down with the father. But I hadn't heard that, so that's really interesting. That's that the daughter, and that actually, I've heard little things. I don't have too much on it because it's everything I've done on research and in passing about that. There's people have claimed that they possibly have seen a little girl, like an apparition of a little girl near Robert. So that would tie in. And like I said, I've only seen like little blurbs about it, nothing. So I can't speak at length on it, but I had heard that by a few people that there was sort of this little and they claimed that she was mixed race or so of the ghost. So that would tie in. That's really interesting. That's really, really interesting. And
Yeah.
who knows? Because like I said, it's 1904, so there's a lot. That it's over 100 years ago, so a lot of information. So that's really, really interesting. So the doll's signature sailor suit that if you look up and Google a picture of him, you'll probably see him in a sailor suit, was most likely an outfit of Robert Eugene. I'm going to refer to him from this point forward as just Gene, because that's what he went by. It was probably an outfit of his as a child, and after he outgrew it, they put it onto Robert, which is kind of weird to me. Just I don't know, dressing a doll in real kids' clothing and stuff.
Yeah,
a little creep factor there. The boy quickly fell in love with Rob. Quickly fell in love with the doll. And decided to name it Robert after himself. Again, he was going by Gene at this time, and decided to name him Robert after his real first name. And by all accounts, he took Robert everywhere. Robert was always with him, and everything seemed normal. It just seemed like a little boy with his, doll. Now, just out there, guys, just a little bit about the doll too. Is this doll's I've seen different accounts, but between 3 and 4 feet tall, right? Isn't that?
I'm seeing about 40 inches.
And so, like I said, I was in my research. It supposedly came from the Steiff company out of Germany, but it wasn't even a doll that they actually manufactured like en masse. It was a doll that they used in window displays, supposedly, and that's why it was a bit taller than most dolls at 4 feet or whatever, which is pretty big. You gotta think. I mean, I was like 4'8" until I was about 14 years old. So I would have only at 14, I would have only been 8 inches taller than the doll. So
yeah,
it's a pretty big one. But anyway, like I said, everything seemed normal. Just seemed like a little boy playing with his toys. That is until one night when Gene awoke to find Robert sitting at the edge of his bed, just staring at him. So he's obviously creeped out. And then moments later, his mother was awoken by screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned, things smashing. Just it sounded like chaos in the bedroom. So she ran to see what the commotion was all about, and she couldn't get in. The door was locked. So she's panicking, yelling, Gene, let me in. And, Gene's just screaming and crying. Finally, she's able to get the door open. And when she enters the room, the furniture is just everywhere, just turned over, everything. It's just in shambles. And poor Gene is curled up in the fetal position on his bed, terrified, and Robert's just sitting on the bed at the edge of the bed, just staring at him, just leering at Gene. And the only words that Gene could get out when his mother's, trying to attend to him and be like, "Hey, what's wrong?" is that Robert did it. And which would become this becomes a refrain throughout the rest of his life. That's all he could say. So the mother, finally is able to get him to calm down and get back to bed and everything. But the whole time she's thinking, she's just like, well, clearly the doll didn't really do it, but how did all this furniture get turned over? Gene's only like 10 years old. This furniture, I mean, this is the 1900s. Everything's real wood. It's not the like particle board like we have. This stuff was made well. How is he able to do it? He's a 10-year-old boy. There just wasn't a way, but I don't know. She ends up just kind of putting it out of her mind after a while, and time would go on. And from that point, the weirdness began to just escalate. Gene's parents would often hear Gene talking to the doll which isn't abnormal, a boy talking, but then they would hear the doll answer back in a deep, completely different voice. It was so deep that they couldn't understand how Robert or how Gene could make this voice, because, you know, he's a 10, 11-year-old boy, still high pitched. He hasn't gone through puberty, anything like this. And this sounds like it's like a deep guttural voice. They also reported seeing the expression on Robert's face change, which again is weird. And they would hear unnatural giggling coming from the bedroom, footsteps running up and down the stairs, but, you know, Gene's not around, or Gene's up in his room playing, or out in the yard playing, but they're hearing footsteps running up and down the stairs, or, you know, footsteps going from room to room at like unnaturally fast speeds. Just weird things just kept happening. So, you know, and as Gene began to grow, Robert would continue to live with Gene throughout his life, with a few periods of not being together. Because as Gene's getting older, he starts becoming interested in, obviously, girls and you know, school, and it turns out he's actually a pretty good artist, and decides that he wants to make a go of this art thing. So he moves to Paris to study art, and work there, obviously, and he would meet his wife Anne in Paris while studying art. And they lived and worked, and Robert was still in Key West at this time, for a few years, until the death of Gene's parents. After the death of Gene's parents, Gene and Anne decided to move back to his childhood home in Key West. It was a nice home, whatever. It was bequeathed to him in the will. So they decided to move back, and at this point, he had kind of established himself as a fairly decent artist. So he figured move back to Key West and, you know, do the whole art thing there. So that's what they do. And when they get back, you know, he's going through all the things, goes through the attic and everything, and he sees Robert, and he's, you know, all those memories flood back to him, that, you know, because this had been probably the longest they had been apart. And at this point, he decides, you know what, Robert needs his own room. So he takes Robert out of the attic where he had been in storage while he was in Paris, and gives him his own room upstairs that overlooks the street. And there was a rocking chair in there, and he would put Robert there, and that sort of became Robert's like de facto bedroom when he wouldn't be in the attic. Was this room upstairs that overlooked the street. Now, Anne, his wife, always kind of felt uneasy about Robert, and understandably, he's a grown man now at this point, and now he's giving a doll his own bedroom.
Yeah, those are red flags. Everybody, ladies, that's a red flag. Go the other way. It's not okay. Yeah. Sorry, Robert. I do apologize, but that is a red flag.
Thank you. I'm glad you have the woman's perspective, because I thought that was super strange. Just like
super.
It's so, you know, she felt uneasy with Robert, but she couldn't put her finger on why, aside from that he's a grown man with a doll. But she began to hear just like weird things again, and, you know, the rocking chair. She would sound like somebody was rocking in the rocking chair when she was downstairs, or, you know, little footsteps. And so, you know, now her unease is building, obviously, because just weird little things, nothing malevolent, nothing you know, in that sense, but just weird stuff. So, and she began to just kind of plead with Jean to just put him back in the attic, but just lock him back in the attic. She's just uncomfortable. And Jean didn't want to, but eventually would concede because it was just, it became an ongoing thing in the house and was causing tension between the two. So he'd move him in there. And everything seemed normal for a couple days. But then strange things started to happen again. Jean and Anne, and visitors to the house would even claim this, that they began to hear, strange sounds coming from the attic, footsteps, the sound of somebody pacing back and forth, devilish giggling, just weird sounds coming out of the attic. So, but Anne, although creeped out, was just, okay, he's in the attic, he's out of sight, out of mind. So she would try to put it out of her mind and not think about it. But soon after, the neighborhood children began to see Robert watch them from an upstairs bedroom as they walked to school. Robert would appear in the window and making a face or just staring at them like just, almost mockingly. And then he would appear in another window and then another window and just, different windows. And they said it was at like a very unnatural speed. Like no person could even get from window to window that quick, never mind a little doll. And again, the kids said that it was almost like he was mocking them. After a few days of this, the kids, pretty freaked out, started walking a different way to school. They would actually go like a quarter mile out of the way just to walk a different way to school to avoid Robert. And eventually would tell their parents, because the parents were wondering why they're walking a different way to school, and they would tell their parents. And then one of the parents or some of the parents decided to talk to Jean about it. And Jean didn't believe it. He was like, nope, no way. He is locked in the attic. Impossible. He's been in the attic now for a while. There's no way. But he goes to investigate anyway. And as he goes upstairs and goes into the bedroom with the rocking chair overlooking the street, to his dismay, there's Robert sitting in the chair, just looking out the window. So he would take Robert, put him up to the attic, and this would repeat itself a few more times. He would, lock Robert up in the attic, and then he would find Robert back in the bedroom in the rocking chair. So, eventually, it's been disputed. Eventually, I've heard some accounts that he would basically stay in the attic until, Jean's death, where I've heard others that actually after a while they just said screw it and he'll stay in the upstairs bedroom. They just kind of shut the door and let him deal.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you had anything on that or
no.
Okay.
So I don't know. I feel like there's so many weird things about that. Like sorry. I caught on to some information, so it actually distracted me for a few minutes. So I apologize.
It's okay.
But no, I find a lot of things kind of crazy about it. I find the fact that not even just in the early 1900s, but even now, people are so easy to say, well, I don't know how this could have possibly happened. I can't think of any logical anything. But then something with maybe a less than normal logic is completely dismissed. It's nope, can't possibly be that, can't possibly be this. But then, can you imagine the power it has to have given whatever was in Robert, to give it its own room? You're giving it its own space. You're treating it like a living, breathing human person. And it's just crazy to me to even think about giving something that much power and then being completely awestruck when when it does something.
That's a great point. That's a really great point. Yeah, I mean, that's it was like I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that is a great point. You're giving it in a room, and then you're just like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
that's yeah. There's a lot of strangeness to this story. So again, it was it's been disputed whether he was in the attic until Jean's death or in that room. I've heard both. But Jean would die in 1974. And soon after, his wife Anne moved to Massachusetts with her sister because Jean had removed Anne from his will. And he did this in retaliation because Anne's mother, his mother-in-law, had removed him from her will, which some accounts were the reasoning was the whole Robert stuff was why she did it. And there, I mean, who knows? It was 1904, but that was, that is some of the rumors that it dealt with Robert, and that's why. But he did that in retaliation, which is really shitty. That's his wife of 50 years or whatever, and he takes her out. That's just crappy.
And it sounds like she put up with a lot. It's
a lot.
I mean, more than I feel like your average woman is gonna put up with. So that's just cold, but
I agree. And so after she Anne moved, then Myrtle Reuter bought and moved into the house, which is now called the Artist House. And when she moved in, Robert was with the house. And when she moved in and was, unpacking stuff, she came across Robert. At this point, Robert had been in the attic after that. And she came across Robert and was a little creeped out by him. Again, it's a 4-foot doll and everything like that. And but also thought it was kind of cute. So she took him downstairs and actually, she put him in that room again, not knowing the history of Robert, but she took him down and put him in there. And by all accounts, had a very, very tenuous relationship with Robert. Was uncomfortable by him, but was respectful of him. There had been accounts of her actually. There were at one point, it wasn't all the way down, but she had fallen down like 2 or 3 steps and had claimed that Robert maybe tripped her or something like that. And there was just weird things. So she had a tenuous relationship with him, kind of kept him in that room, and actually gave him his own little teddy bear, a stuffed animal that you can see in some of the photos and stuff. And this seemed to, Robert seemed to really like the stuffed animal. And it sort of helped their relationship. And, she kept her distance and he kind of kept he kept his distance. But, weird things would happen, the footsteps, the stuff like that, but nothing malicious, malevolent. She wasn't getting hurt anymore or anything like that. And she would live there for the next 20 years. And then finally, and then for the next 20 years, and then when she went to move, as she's getting older and everything, she decided to, she donates it to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West. And not much more here, but, she donates him. She moves to her new home, and 3 months after the donation, dies. Some say under suspicious circumstances. I couldn't find the actual cause of death. Some said it was kind of strange or something, but dies 3 months after, after donating him to the museum. And that kind of brings us to the museum. So,
all right. So, so after he was donated in 1994 to the museum, he was set in a glass case, and it said that he might actually still kind of taunt people that come in contact with him. He spends really his whole life in that museum now, with a few exceptions, one of which is in October. Sorry, in October, he spends the month in the old post office and custom house, which is my understanding also in Key West, so not super far away, but so he does get a little break from being there. When visitors are asked about their experience with Robert, they say some of them claim to see his facial expression change, which I'm going to touch on that for a minute, because if you Google Robert and you look at pictures of him, and I full disclosure that it is said that if you view a picture of Robert, it's possible that it could lead to some bad luck. So just don't blame us if that does happen. Apologize. Take it however you want. But when you do look at pictures of him, you'll see that there's not a lot of detail on his face. He has eyes, and then a bump where the nose is, and then like a slight indentation where a mouth would be, but really not a lot of detail. So to show any expression, really that gives it a whole new level of eerie. It's a whole new ball game when it doesn't have much of a face and it's making you feel like it's making faces at you. When you visit the museum, you're actually urged to try and take pictures of Robert, but it is suggested very heavily that you ask his permission. It is said that if he doesn't want his picture taken, that the cameras will malfunction, the pictures will not come out, and any cameras that do malfunction or lose battery or lose power seem to be fine as soon as they're not near Robert anymore.
So,
now, yeah.
One, I just wanted to throw this in here because, like, I find this fascinating. One account that I saw about the camera. One guy, he didn't ask to take the photo, and took 2 photos of Robert, and didn't ask. When he went to develop the film or whatever, it was the whole reel or whatever, however, was all Robert pictures of him making different faces. Just in each one, it was like the whole film had developed. Even though he only took 2, it was making different faces at him. So
I just got a chill right up my back, like right up it. That's scary. That's so eerie. Yeah, no, I have goosebumps. I'm a big goosebump right now. That's awesome. So obviously there are different malfunctions that happen with the cameras and stuff like that. So if you do go, ask his permission and be polite, be respectful, thank him, say please, use all the manners your mom taught you, or your dad taught you, or your grandmother taught you, whoever taught you manners, use them and be polite and be, treat him with a level of respect that you would want to be treated with. And I don't want someone taking pictures of me. It's uncomfortable and it's awkward, so I would like to be asked. So let's use the same respect for him. He also does not like to be called an it. He likes to be called him or Robert or he or however. So it's also said that visitors can feel him looking at them, and that slight movements can be noticed in his cage. I haven't seen that anybody actually sees him move, but I have seen a lot of that he's in different positions in the cage. His hands in a different position, his head's cocked to a different side.
So creepy.
Oh my god. I have to say that again. I have to edit that out because I just said cock in different size in the same sentence. Sorry. His head can be cocked to a different side.
Yeah.
And sorry. Some say that his head can be cocked to a different side. His hand can be in a different position. His legs will move. He does have a little stuffed animal, and that can be in different places. So Robert's keeping it interesting. He's really just kind of keeping these staff and the visitors on their toes. So as I said, Robert obviously spends most of his life in the museum in that case, but there has been a very few times that he has got to take a break from Key West. He did go to TAPSCon in 2008, and he was on an episode of Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum um, for the Travel Channel. A lot of times since the Robert story has come out, he's been paid tribute to in a lot of different ways. There's actually a whole series of Robert movies. It's Robert in 2015, and it actually has 4 sequels. It has Curse of Robert the Doll, The Toymaker, Revenge of Robert the Doll, and then Robert Reborn. I will say that if you're going to go and watch them, they're not super scary, but they're very campy, and they are a fun watch. And he does not look like the actual Robert, much like Annabelle does not look like the actual Annabelle. They took liberties, and actually in the movie he looks very similar to Annabelle in the way his face is created and everything. Mm-hmm. A replica of Robert was actually in an episode of Ozzie and Jack's World Detour, and he has been featured in numerous podcasts. So he's been talked about a lot. A lot of tributes been paid, and it's just such a great story, and I really think that's a large part of the reason we had to do it too. It's just such a cool conversation to have, and there's so much. Like we've already come out and told you the facts, but I know there's still so much more to come. So,
and there's even more out there too. It's like, yeah, no, this is like I said, this is one of my favorites, and just it's like so much weird stuff. Like we kind of talked about the pictures and either it not coming out or him being on the whole roll and making different faces. But people also have claimed after, supposedly disrespecting Robert in different ways, come into financial ruin or get into car accidents or just all sorts of just bad things happen. And you can actually, like, even if you do Google search, you can find a lot, or even if you go on social medias, there's I know there used to be I think there still is, like, sorry Robert is a hashtag. There's a bunch of different Robert hashtags on Twitter and stuff like that. So there's a lot of info out there, and a lot of people claiming that really bad things happened to them after disrespecting Robert. Another story I'd heard is actually by one of the, I think she was like a curator or something at the museum. And, after hours one night, kind of doing it, because they clean Robert's case, I think once a year. They said they take him out and, inspect him because, it's over 100 years old, make sure it's not coming apart and everything like that. But one night she was in there, they're cleaning and everything. And then, all the lights are off at this point, getting ready to, get her stuff together and take off. All of a sudden, all the lights in the building come on at once, which was supposedly impossible because it was like there was a bunch of different ranges in the building. It's like you would need, I think they said, like 5 or 6 different people to get them going at all the same time because of where they're all located and everything. It wasn't like you could just go to one main breaker and turn everything on. It was like you had to be at different areas. And then some weird noises happened, and this worker ran out of the building, didn't even lock it, and ran home, even though she had a bike locked up outside the building. Didn't even unlock her bike, just out of the building, ran all the way home and left her bike. And returned the next morning, and she was so freaked out by it. So there's a lot of stories out there. Again, like Shay said, if you're gonna do anything with Robert, treat him with respect. Ask for permission. People send him letters every year. They were talking about how many letters he gets, like, a day. It's kind of crazy. They actually like running out of room for all these things. And some of the curators will actually answer them. People will actually send him gifts, and they were even talking about people actually send him weed. So, like, people send him weed.
Nice. All right. Well, cool.
But
I like it.
Yeah, I thought so too. Suppose he likes gifts, stuff like that, toys, stuffed animals, stuff like that. So just be careful around him. Like I said, I thanked him at the beginning of this episode just because this one, it's like I always say I'm a skeptic, and I want that definitive proof. This is one of those ones that gets me. It got me when I first researched it.
So I feel like, and obviously we can cut this, if not, but I feel like you have some personal experience, possibly from an episode of a different podcast.
Yes.
Your car and heat and all that other stuff. But if you don't want to talk about it, obviously we'll cut this out.
Oh no, I'm glad you brought it up because I hadn't thought about that. That's right. So we had done a different podcast, God, what, a year ago or something, and I had stumbled across Robert, and we did an episode on Robert, and I didn't disrespect Robert. One of the people on the episode did. One of it was being antagonistic, but I didn't. But I didn't specifically thank Robert or anything like that. And I'll tell you, the week after that episode, some really strange things happened. It was the heat went out in my house, right? And then it was 3 things. I'm trying to think. Do you remember what they were?
It was your heat, something with your car. Like, I don't remember if it was a battery thing but something with your car. Like, it wouldn't start or something. And then I think didn't you end up getting a little sick? And then I got a little sick. And then I had something go on with my car. It was just all within a week. It was so weird.
Yeah, and so God, I'm gonna have to double check exactly, but that sounds right to me. That sounds like it was happened. It was. I know the heat went out in my house because that became a big issue, and it was winter, and it was like, oh God, the heat's completely out. I can't remember. It might have been the battery because I know I had battery issues a little while back. I don't remember. And the sick, that sounds about right to me, but it was weird because and then you like you said, you had 2 things, and the one person that antagonized Robert had nothing happen to him. Had nothing.
I had something happen at work too, I think, and I can't remember what it was, but I know something big happened at work, and I just can't remember. Yeah,
I'll try to find that episode another time, and we'll give you guys and listeners an update. I'm glad you brought that because I had forgotten about that. Like, it was just like boom, 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 right after 3 things, and it was yeah. So yeah, Robert, guys, check him out. Google him. Check out those movies too. Like she said, it doesn't look like him, but I enjoy them. If you like horror, don't go in expecting Gone with the Wind or Casablanca. Don't expect that. It's just a fun, campy romp of a movie. So
the acting is amazing. It's definitely, at the very least, the movie is gonna put a smile on your face because it is. Yeah, it's. Go into it expecting to be amused, and you will be 100% all the way. So I feel like I have some Robert thoughts that I want to see if you line up with me.
Cool.
So, for one thing that I found really weird first, and I checked my dates just to make sure that I was right. So the Steve company that Robert possibly came from in 1904, when Robert supposedly came from that company, and I don't doubt he did. The teddy bear was actually a really big toy, and the Steve company absolutely was part of that, and they were manufacturing and shipping thousands and thousands and thousands of teddy bears. Do you know why teddy bears in 1904?
No. Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes.
No? Oh, yes?
No,
Okay.
it is. Yep.
Okay.
So I don't fully understand the story behind it, so I'll have to do a little more research. But basically, Teddy Roosevelt ended up using what became known as the teddy bear as part of his campaign because he was given the opportunity to shoot an injured, elderly, captive bear as a hunting trophy. And he didn't, which, good.
Oh,
You shouldn't.
alright.
That's awful.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. That took a better turn than I thought it was. I got all
yes.
discouraged. That was a good turn.
No. I honestly, I don't know that I would have said it if it ended the way that when I started reading it, I thought it was going to go, but it didn't. So it's funny to me that his grandfather would be in Germany in 1904 and be near this toy company and buy Robert and not one of the teddy bears or not one of the they sold so many different toys and Robert is not, I feel, like looking at him, something you would pick for a young child. And he's a great window model, like you said, almost like a mannequin, and he's
Yeah.
very good for that. And I can almost see why he might like his stuffed animal if that's something that kind of came with him. If it comes from a toy store, and he was posed with stuffed animals, maybe that's part of that like. But it's so funny to me that the grandfather would come home with him and not one of the teddy bears, which at that time was so prominent and so big, unless
Yeah.
it had a purpose.
Yeah, so like if it's like the It toy, because every year there's like an It toy now that we know. So that's really interesting because I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good point. Because yeah, why, if that's the hot toy, why are you buying Robert the doll, which by all accounts was a window model anyway, was a window display anyway, and he's a young boy. You would think a young boy would rather have a teddy bear than a doll. That's a great
Yeah.
point. I never even thought of that. Put that two together. That's a really good point.
So let me take that a little bit further then, because I feel like this is gonna be one of those things where you're either gonna be like, oh my gosh, or you're gonna be like, you're nuts, and that's fine. Whichever way you go with it, I want to hear it.
Okay.
So Germany, 1904, like that, especially that era, in kind of setting myself there and really kind of giving it some thought, and the claims behind Robert, the movement, the malicious activity, the kind of abusive activity in some cases, and whatnot, feels a lot like, obviously, an unwelcome spirit that might be of a less than nice nature. Now, I can't really put my finger on why he would have come home without a teddy bear and came home with Robert. Again, like I said, unless there was a purpose behind why. Do you know what a Dybbuk is?
I do. Yes, Dybbuk
Okay.
and a yeah.
So a Dybbuk is a in the Jewish religion, or the Jewish.
It's mythology, really.
There you go. In Jewish mythology, there we go. Thank you. It is an evil spirit that, when captured, is held within a vessel so it can't continuously cause problems. Hence, a Dybbuk box. I feel like it stands to reason that it doesn't have to be a box. And if you think of all of the things that we know to possibly be true about different spirits, is if you offer them a vessel and they take it, that is now the thing they act out of, much like a Dybbuk box would be. And without closer examination of Robert's core, we don't know if there's anything written in there. We don't know if there's anything carved in. We know that he's likely stuffed with sawdust or like straw almost. But the way he acts and the way and just the time and the location and everything feels very Dybbuk to me.
And that's really interesting. And first of all, I don't think that's great. I think that's actually, you might be onto something here for real, because you said most of the time with Dybbuks we associate a box, but it doesn't have to be a box. It's like, or even those boxes, differ from, just their types. Like I've heard about the one that the big box that Post Malone had bought and sold since because he got in a bad car accident afterward, was almost like an armoire. You know, it wasn't just like just a box. So yeah, it would stand to reason that it doesn't have to be just a box. So I can definitely go there. And then when you think about some of the weird accounts, especially in more recent times, of people, visiting the museum and not asking for permission and stuff. It's like you've heard about car accidents, guys breaking their legs. I heard about a ski accident. I heard about a parasailing accident. I heard about a base jumping accident with where and they're not dying, but they're getting hurt or injured or bad stuff's happening. Which goes right along lines with the Dybbuk, like Post Malone. He claims it, and he's not shy about talking about this Dybbuk bot. That he got in a really bad car accident and could have died, and so he had ordered it off like eBay for like 25 or 50 grand or something like that. So I'm there with you. I could definitely see that. And honestly, I like that a little bit better than the whole Bahamian voodoo sort of thing, because part of that whole story seems kind of racist to me anyway.
It does.
A little bit,
So I think you're referring to, I think it's Obeah or Obeah, I think is actually the that voodoo, and it was actually outlawed and punishable because it was they were scared that it was gonna aid in a slavery uprising, so they actually outlawed it, and it's awful, and I can't, so I'm with you. I feel like I'm of the hope that it's in this direction, obviously.
I really like that. I love it when you do that, Shai, where you tie it into something that I haven't thought about, but it's so seamless. I love that. It's like done that. Yeah, I mean, you do it all the time, but it's just like something I hadn't thought of.
So I actually have one more, and I almost feel I'm torn between feeling like it can be connected to the Dybbuk and feeling like it could actually just be another whole explanation. So do you know what a death doll is?
Not really. So why don't you tell us?
So a death doll, and I apologize if I'm missing any details. It's a little before my time, and it's not really something that has a ton of information that's super specific. So I'm going to try my best to explain this, and anybody who wants to email or message us in any way to give us more correct information, I would love it, so please. But a death doll a lot of times will be a doll made in the likeness of a child who has passed, and it will have in some way hair or teeth or ashes or whatnot of the child, and it's usually given to the parents of that child. And the way I believe sometimes the inhabiting of certain things works is a connection, and you're going to have a connection to part of your body, part of your hair, part of who you are. So I feel like that really could lead to a haunting and of an item like a doll. And the other thing that I can't help but kind of really think about is if you look at Robert has eyes. Your typical mannequin, even back then, didn't have eyes. So like a display mannequin would look like a featureless doll, and Robert has eyes. He doesn't have much other feature. But if you go back, especially to the early 1900s, and you think about a death mask is typically a plaster or clay, even. It depends on the region, it depends on the time, but a cast almost of a deceased person's face. And a lot of times, especially if it's just plaster or whatnot like that, it won't have nearly as much detail as their actual face. And anytime I see Robert's face, the first thing I think is Death Mask. And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes life will be given to the eyes. Just, I don't know if it's for good measure or for comfort or whatnot, but it kind of feels like that would almost explain why he has little to no feature. So I don't know if it's maybe somehow all connected or just its own separate thing, but like that's the vibe I get.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Like I said, I'm not super familiar. I know like Death Mask a little bit, you know. So that's super interesting, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Actually, it makes a lot of sense because it is the face is bizarre, you know. It is so, and it's like you've hit on you know, devoid of, you know, distinctive features and stuff, but then people talk about it. So yeah, no, that's super interesting, and I like it. It makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So again, like I said, I love it when you tie these things in, because you always make me think of something that I hadn't kind of thought about. I have a tendency on these things sometimes to be a little too linear in my thinking, so it's really appreciated when you come in and it's just like, holy shit, that makes a lot of sense. That's you know, that's, I hadn't thought of that, but it's yeah, and that's what's fun about these talks too, these paranormal talks, because it's like there's just so many different ways you can go with things and stuff. So it's
it's this unexpected banter that makes why we're doing this so much fun. Like, so true, because we're both like so passionate about it, and we love learning about that stuff, and anything new, any new link, any new little anything is just, it's so freaking cool. And to have someone as equally matched in interest as I am, even my crazy ass ideas, and sometimes your own crazy ass ideas, it's awesome, because we're both open-minded enough to know that it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly put. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's God, I mean, yeah, I love this stuff. So
Me too.
awesome. All right. So anything else we want to hit on before we let the viewers go this week?
No, I can't think of anything. I think we've really touched on everything.
So guys, if you're interested, check them out, but be respectful. Make sure you be respectful. I'd like to thank Robert again for allowing us to do this
Thank you, Robert.
video. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. And yeah, I hope you're not upset by anything we did, because we tried to be as respectful as possible here. So, but anyways, that's all we got for you guys this week. So thanks for listening or watching, and be sure to check us out next week when we set up camp in Iowa. So thanks, guys.
Bye.